100,000 years ago, the world was filled with humans. In the cold valleys of Europe and Asia, the robust Neanderthals thrived. In the forests of Siberia, we now know lived the mysterious Denisovans. On the Indonesian island of Flores, the tiny 1-meter-tall Homo floresiensis hunted. And in a corner of the East African Rift Valley, our own ancestors, Homo sapiens, were just one group among many, and a deeply insignificant one at that. We were not at the top of the food chain. We were in the middle, living in constant fear of lions, hyenas, and saber-toothed cats. Our primary role in the ecosystem was not that of the great hunter, but of the opportunistic scavenger, following other predators, waiting for them to finish their kill, and then, only when it was safe, darting in to crack open the leftover bones for the one nutritious thing we could get: the marrow. Fast forward to today. All those other human species are gone. We are the last human standing. From that terrified band of scavengers, we have exploded to a population of 8 billion, settling every continent, from the frozen Arctic to the remote islands of the Pacific. We have fundamentally altered the planet's climate, initiating a new geological epoch, the Anthropocene. We have split the atom, unleashing the power of the stars. We have deciphered the genetic code, the very language of life itself, and are now learning to write it. We are, by any practical definition, the gods of this planet, with the power to create and to destroy on a whim. This is the Sapiens paradox. How did this one unremarkable African ape go from cracking bones for marrow to splitting the atom and reshaping the world?
The immediate answer, the one we tell ourselves, is our superior intelligence, encapsulated by our uniquely large brain. But Harari argues this is a trap. For one, a large brain is a massive evolutionary liability. Our brain consumes 25% of our resting body's calories, even though it's only 2% of our weight. It also led to a crisis in childbirth, as larger skulls struggled to pass through a narrow birth canal. But here is the real puzzle. Anatomically modern Homo sapiens, with brains just like ours, walked the earth for over 100,000 years before we accomplished anything special. For millennia, we had the hardware, but not the software. Our tools remained simple, our social structures small, and our impact on the environment negligible. And we were not alone in the big brain department. Our cousins, the Neanderthals, had brains just as large, if not larger. They were not the dim-witted brutes of caricature. They were highly adapted, successful hunters who survived multiple ice ages. They buried their dead, likely cared for their sick, and had their own simple tools. In fact, the first time sapiens tried to migrate out of Africa, around 100,000 years ago, they encountered the Neanderthals in the Middle East, and they were repulsed. They lost. They were forced back into Africa. So no, it was not the brain alone, and it was not our tools. Something else must have happened. Harari calls this the tree of knowledge mutation, a profound change not in our bodies, but in our minds.
This mutation, which Harari pinpoints as occurring around 70,000 years ago, gave sapiens a revolutionary new kind of language. It wasn't just a language for describing objective reality. Look, a lion, or there is a river. All animals have that. Our new language allowed us to speak about things that do not exist at all, except in our collective imagination. This is the power of fiction. A sapiens could now say, the lion is the guardian spirit of our tribe, or the river is our sacred border. This ability is the secret to all our success. Why? Because it unlocks mass cooperation. All social animals cooperate, but they do so based on intimate, one-on-one knowledge. A chimpanzee group, as anthropologist Robin Dunbar noted, breaks down after it exceeds about 150 individuals, the Dunbar number, because it's impossible to personally know, trust, and gossip about everyone. But Homo sapiens can cooperate in the millions. How?
We are united by our shared belief in abstract stories. Consider a modern corporation like Peugeot. What is Peugeot? It's not its factories, those could be sold. It's not its workers or its CEO. They can all be replaced. Peugeot is a legal fiction, a story that exists only on paper and in our minds, yet this legal entity can own property, pay taxes, and sue in court. You cannot convince a chimpanzee to work for you by promising him company stock in the afterlife. But you can convince a sapiens. Nations, religions, money, laws, and human rights, these are the most powerful forces in the world, and none of them are objective realities. They are all fictions. They are stories we tell each other, stories so powerful they become the glue that holds our civilizations together.
For over 100,000 years, Homo sapiens was a creature of limited significance, even with our large brains. Our toolkits, simple stone choppers, scrapers, and knives, remained almost unchanged for tens of thousands of years. We were, in effect, trapped by our biology. Then, somewhere between 70,000 and 30,000 years ago, an event Harari calls the Tree of Knowledge mutation occurred. This was not a physical revolution. It wasn't a stronger muscle, a sharper tooth, or even a larger brain case. It was, as far as we can tell, an accidental genetic rewiring of the sapiens' brain. It was the moment our fully formed hardware finally got its revolutionary new software. Suddenly, our language, and with it, our entire way of thinking, changed. This cognitive leap is the true dividing line of human history. Before it, sapiens in Africa were repulsed by the Neanderthals in the Middle East. After this mutation, sapiens erupted out of Africa with unprecedented speed and creativity, rapidly replacing every other human species on the planet. We see the first unambiguous signs of this change in the archaeological record, the first jewelry, the first complex art, the first sacred objects, the first boats capable of crossing open water to places like Australia, and the first complex, multi-stage hunting strategies. This wasn't just a new tool, it was the birth of human culture, imagination, and the very beginning of the end for every other species that stood in our way.
So, what exactly was this new language? How was it different? Many animals possess sophisticated communication. Vervet monkeys, for example, have distinct calls for different predators. One warning cry for eagle, which sends the whole troop scrambling into the bushes, and a completely different cry for lion, which sends them climbing up a tree. This is remarkable, but this communication is always and only about objective reality. It is bound to the here and now. A monkey cannot tell its troop about a lion it saw last week. It cannot discuss the concept of a lion, or what might happen if a lion attacks tomorrow. The sapiens' cognitive revolution allowed our language to detach from reality. We could, of course, still say, "Careful, a lion." But for the first time in the history of life, a preacher could also say, "The great lion is our ancestor," or "The lion god demands a sacrifice of fruit to ensure a good hunt." The most stunning proof of this is the Stato Lion Man. This is a 32,000-year-old statuette carved from mammoth ivory, found in a German cave. It is a work of pure fiction. It depicts a creature that has never existed, a human body with the head of a lion. The artist who carved this was expressing a concept, a myth, a belief. They were communicating something unreal. This ability to discuss fictions is the single most unique feature of our language, and it is the gateway to everything that follows. But before sapiens were inventing gods and lion men, this new, flexible language served a more immediate and practical purpose: gossip. This is what Harari, referencing anthropologist Robin Dunbar, calls the gossip theory. It argues that our language evolved, first and foremost, as a way of sharing information about other people. It is, in effect, a form of vocal grooming. For other primates, like chimpanzees, social bonds are built and maintained through time-consuming physical touch, grooming, patting, and hugging. You can only groom one individual at a time. This physical contact-based society puts a hard cap on group size. Language is far more efficient. You can groom multiple people simultaneously simply by having a conversation. More importantly, language allows you to share vital social information about people you aren't even with. Who is trustworthy? Who is cheating the group? Who is sleeping with whom? Who is a reliable partner? And who is a dangerous rival? This constant stream of social data allowed sapiens to build larger, more stable, and far more complex social groups than any other primate. It allowed us to cooperate effectively in bands of up to roughly 150 individuals, the famous Dunbar number. This was our first great cooperative advantage, allowing sapiens bands to outcompete and overwhelm smaller Neanderthal families. But even gossip has its limits. Gossip is a powerful social tool, but it has a hard, mathematical limit. As the anthropologist Robin Dunbar established, the human brain can only maintain about 150 stable relationships. This Dunbar number is the natural ceiling for any group built on personal trust and intimate knowledge. You can't gossip about or personally know 1,000 people. This, for millennia, was the glass ceiling for human cooperation. So how did we break it? How did we go from small hunter-gatherer bands of 150 to building cities of 10,000 or empires of 10 million? The answer is that sapiens leveraged the other revolutionary feature of our new language, the ability to create and believe in shared myths. You cannot unite 1,000 people by gossip, but you can unite them by giving them a common story to believe in. This is the true killer app of the cognitive revolution. A shared belief in a tribal ancestor, a guardian spirit, a set of laws handed down from a god, or a nation's destiny creates a shared identity and a common code of conduct among total strangers. This fictional glue allows two sapiens who have never met and who might otherwise be rivals to instantly trust one another. If they both believe in the same God, or both serve the same king, or both believe in the same human rights, they are part of the same us. This ability to scale cooperation beyond the limits of personal acquaintance is what allowed sapiens, and only sapiens, to build the first large-scale societies. Let's reconsider that 32,000-year-old Stado Lion Man statuette. What was it for? It wasn't just decorative art, it was a piece of social technology. This object, representing a being that never existed, was almost certainly a totem, a spirit, or an ancestor. By believing in the Lion Man, a group of sapiens defined who they were. It created an us versus them. More importantly, it established a framework of rules. What does the Lion Man demand of us? He demands we share our food with the sick. He forbids us from killing another member of the tribe. The Lion Man became a supernatural authority that governed behavior, enforced cooperation, and promised rewards or punishments. This mechanism may seem ancient, but it is precisely the same one we use today. As Harari points out, consider the modern corporation, such as Peugeot. What is Peugeot? It is not its factories, which could be sold. It is not its employees, who are constantly changing. It is not its CEO, who can be fired. Peugeot is a limited liability company, a complex legal fiction. It is a story invented by lawyers that exists only on paper and in our collective imagination. Yet, this legal ghost can own property, borrow money, and sue in court, as if it were a real person. This myth allows millions of strangers, investors, engineers, factory workers, and car dealers to cooperate seamlessly across continents. The Stado Lion Man and Peugeot SA are functionally identical. They are shared fictions that enable mass cooperation toward a common goal. Armed with this new superpower of fictional language, Homo sapiens was no longer just another ape. Our ability to cooperate in large, flexible numbers gave us a decisive, terrifying advantage. Around 70,000 years ago, we began our second and final migration out of Africa. Our first attempt, 100,000 years ago, had failed. We were stopped and repulsed by the incumbent Neanderthals in the Middle East. But this time, it was different. This time, we were a weaponized collective. Wherever sapiens arrived, the native human populations that had lived there for hundreds of thousands of years vanished. The Neanderthals of Europe and Asia, the Denisovans of Siberia, Homo erectus in Java, the hobbits of Flores, all of them disappeared within a few thousand years of our arrival. It was, Harari suggests, the first and most complete act of ethnic cleansing in history. A single sapiens band was no match for a Neanderthal band. But a sapiens tribe of 500, united by a myth and capable of complex multi-band strategy, could systematically wipe out the smaller, less cooperative Neanderthal families. And our path of destruction didn't stop with other humans. When sapiens first set foot on Australia 45,000 years ago, it was a land of giants, 2-ton wombats, giant tree kangaroos, and monitor lizards the size of crocodiles. Within a few thousand years, 23 of the 24 large animal species there were extinct. The same pattern repeated when sapiens crossed into the Americas. The mammoths, the mastodons, the saber-toothed cats, all gone. This was the first wave of extinction. Long before the first farm, the first city, or the first steam engine, we, the masters of fiction, had already become the deadliest species in the history of the planet. For 60,000 years after the cognitive revolution, Homo sapiens lived as hunter-gatherers. Having dispatched our human rivals and the megafauna, we were the undisputed masters of the planet, living in small, mobile bands. We are taught to imagine their lives as nasty, brutish, and short, but the evidence suggests otherwise. They were, in many ways, the original affluent society. Their diet was incredibly varied: nuts, fruits, mushrooms, roots, insects, and the occasional prized kill. They likely worked far less than we do, perhaps only 30 to 40 hours a week, with the rest of their time devoted to gossip, storytelling, and socializing. Their knowledge of their environment was profound. They were masters of botany, zoology, and orienteering. This was, arguably, the most successful and stable lifestyle in human history, lasting for over 3,000 generations. Then, starting around 12,000 years ago, in a hilly region of the Middle East we call the Fertile Crescent, some sapiens bands began to do something new, and at first almost imperceptible. They stopped wandering. Instead of just gathering wild wheat, they began to cultivate it. They began clearing rocks from fields, weeding out competitors, and saving the best grains for the next season. It wasn't a single event, but a slow, gradual slide, which unfolded over many generations. Each year they stayed a little longer. Their temporary camps became permanent villages, and their relationship with the land changed forever. This was the dawn of the agricultural revolution, a decision that would, in the span of a few millennia, completely rewire our species and the planet. We are taught to see this revolution as humanity's great leap forward. The story we tell is one of progress. Agriculture allowed us to settle down, create a surplus of food, which in turn allowed for the birth of cities, writing, science, and civilization. This is the foundation stone of our modern world. But Yuval Noah Harari presents a stunningly different perspective. This revolution, he argues, was history's biggest fraud. It was a trap, one that Homo sapiens walked into with open eyes, lured by a promise that was never fulfilled. The promise was that if we work harder, our lives will be better. We will have more food, we will be secure. This, Harari claims, was a profound miscalculation. The fraud was that the bargain made life worse, not better, for the average individual. We traded a life of varied, stimulating movement for one of back-breaking, repetitive toil. We exchanged the diverse diet of the forager for the nutritional poverty of a single crop. The deal was a Faustian one, and the trap was generational. The first generation that settled down might have remembered the old way of life, but their children were born into this new reality, and their children's children knew nothing else. The knowledge of how to be a forager was lost. By the time we realized the cost of settlement, it was too late. We were locked in. We had traded quality of life for quantity of food, and in doing so had become slaves to the very plants we thought we were mastering. The evidence for this fraud is written on the bones of our ancestors. Archaeologists studying early farmer skeletons find a grim catalog of human suffering. First, our diet collapsed. Foragers ate dozens of different plants and animals, providing a wide array of vitamins and minerals. The early farmer, by contrast, got 90% of their calories from a single, nutritionally poor staple: wheat in the Middle East, rice in Asia, or potatoes in the Andes. This led to widespread malnutrition, iron deficiencies, and a dramatic increase in dental cavities and enamel defects. Skeletons from early farming villages are, on average, shorter than their forager ancestors, a clear sign of poor nutrition. Second, the dawn of agriculture was the dawn of infectious disease. Foragers roamed in small, mobile bands, leaving their waste behind. Farmers lived in permanent, crowded, and unsanitary settlements, which became breeding grounds for bacteria. Furthermore, they began living in close proximity to their newly domesticated animals, pigs, chickens, and cattle. Nearly all of our worst plagues, from smallpox to measles to influenza, are zoonotic diseases that made the jump from livestock to their new human hosts. Finally, our quality of life and labor plummeted. Farming is incredibly difficult work. Clearing fields, tilling soil, hauling water, and weeding all day is far more arduous and body-wrecking than the varied tasks of a forager. The farmer was now shackled to a tiny plot of land, living under a new kind of tyranny: the anxiety of the future, a constant fear that a single drought, flood, or pestilence could wipe out their entire livelihood. So, if the agricultural revolution was such a bad deal for individual sapiens, why did we do it? And why did it spread so successfully? Harari argues that we are asking the wrong question. We tend to view history from our own human-centric perspective. We think we domesticated wheat. But Harari asks us to flip the script and look at this from the perspective of evolutionary success, which is measured in the sheer number of copies of a species' DNA. From this viewpoint, it was not we who domesticated wheat, it was wheat that domesticated us. 10,000 years ago, wheat was just one of many wild grasses, confined to a small region in the Middle East. It was an insignificant plant, competing for sunlight and water. Today, wheat is one of the most successful plants in the history of the Earth. It covers over 2.25 million square kilometers of the globe, an area 10 times the size of Great Britain. How did it achieve this? It convinced a foolish ape, Homo sapiens, to do all its work for it. This ape, in exchange for a nutritionally poor food source, began to dedicate its entire life to wheat service. Sapiens cleared forests, removed competing weeds, hauled water under the hot sun, and defended the wheat from all its predators, like locusts and rabbits. We even became its primary method of seed dispersal, carrying its grains to every corner of the planet. From an evolutionary standpoint, the true victor of this revolution was not humanity, it was the wheat. This fraud had one and only one evolutionary payoff: quantity over quality. While the individual farmer's life was harder, more anxious, and less healthy than the individual foragers, agriculture allowed a small patch of land to produce far more calories. It wasn't better food, but it was more food. and more food translates directly into more people. This is the simple, brutal calculus of evolution. The agricultural revolution allowed sapiens populations to explode. A village of 100 farmers could now live in the territory that once supported only a single band of 50 foragers. This demographic explosion is the engine of history. But this explosion came at a profound psychological cost. For the first time, humanity became anchored to a single spot and to a single timeline. The hunter-gatherer's mind was focused on the present. They found food for today and perhaps tomorrow. The farmer, by contrast, became obsessed with the future. Their entire life was now governed by the harvest cycle. They had to worry about next month's planting, next season's weather, and next year's crop yield. This gave birth to a new and uniquely human form of anxiety. It created a class of people, farmers, who produced a surplus. And this surplus created a new problem. It had to be stored, managed, and protected from thieves and neighboring tribes. This surplus was the very thing that fed the first non-farmers, the first kings, the first priests, the first soldiers, and the first bureaucrats. The population explosion and food surpluses created by agriculture solved one problem but created a host of new ones. As villages grew into crowded cities of 10,000, 50,000 or more, the old social mechanisms broke down. Gossip and personal bonds, the Dunbar number, were useless for organizing a city. How do you manage a complex society of total strangers? How do you coordinate labor, distribute grain, and settle disputes? The answer, Harari argues, was to invent new, more powerful shared fictions. Hunter-gatherer myths about a great lion spirit were fine for a tribe. But to run a city, you needed a new generation of gods, kings, and laws. You needed grand legal codes, like the Code of Hammurabi, a story that declared that a king was appointed by the gods to enforce justice. But the most ingenious and successful fiction ever invented to manage this new complexity was money. Before money, trade was clumsy barter. I'll trade you 3 bushels of my wheat for that old pig of yours. What if the other person doesn't need your wheat? Money solves this. It is not an objective reality. It's a social construct. It's an agreement. It is a system of mutual, impersonal trust. A piece of silver or a printed piece of paper has no intrinsic value. You can't eat it. But as long as everyone believes it has value, it becomes the most powerful tool for cooperation ever devised. It allows 2 strangers who may despise each other's religion and hate each other's king to trade and cooperate peacefully and efficiently. Money was a revolutionary unifier, but it was purely economic. It could not, by itself, create a stable political order. That task fell to the next great unifier, empire. For most of history, humanity was fragmented into countless small, local cultures, each with its own language, gods, and traditions. Empires, by their very nature, are projects of conquest and assimilation. They are almost always established through violence, subjugation, and the suppression of local identities. The Romans, the Han Dynasty, the Mauryan Empire in India, all were built on blood and force. And yet, Harari argues, empires have been the most common and, paradoxically, one of the most effective unifying forces in history. Their legacy is complex. They destroy local cultures, but they also create new, larger imperial cultures that are often inherited by their successors. The Romans conquered the Gauls, the Greeks, and the Egyptians, but in doing so, they also spread Roman law, Latin-based languages, and Hellenistic philosophy across the entire Mediterranean. Today, many cultures proudly define themselves using the very tools, the languages, laws, and cultural norms left behind by the empires that once brutally conquered their ancestors. Empires, like money, were a new kind of imagined order, a fiction that successfully governed millions of people under a single set of rules.
While empires unified people politically,
and money unified them economically, a third and profoundly powerful unifier emerged to unite them spiritually: the universal religion. For most of history, religions were local. The spirits of my tribe, the gods of my city, were not your gods. They were tied to a specific place and a specific people. But then, a new and radical idea began to spread. The idea that there was one singular, supreme truth that applied to everyone, everywhere. These new universal religions, Buddhism, Christianity, and Islam, were revolutionary. They were the first to be missionary faiths. A Buddhist did not believe that the path to ending suffering was only for Indians. They believed it was a universal truth for all sentient beings. A Christian did not believe Jesus died only for the sins of Judeans. They believed he died for all of humanity. This universal vision gave them an unprecedented power to unite vast, diverse populations. For the first time, a merchant in Persia and a warrior in Spain could find common ground, not because they shared a king or a currency, but because they were both Muslim, brothers and sisters under one universal God. This new fiction, a universal cosmic order, was the final step in creating the globally interconnected human world we know today. For thousands of years, the great imagined orders of religion and empire were built on a foundation of certainty. All the important answers, it was assumed, were already known. They were written in sacred texts or handed down from wise ancestors. If you had a question about the cosmos, politics, or ethics, you simply consulted the Bible, the Quran, or the teachings of Confucius. The goal of knowledge was not to discover new things, but to better understand the old truths. There was no concept of progress as we know it. Then, starting just 500 years ago in Western Europe, a new and truly radical revolution began, built on an idea that was the exact opposite of all prior traditions. This was the scientific revolution, and its engine was the discovery of ignorance. Science is the only system of knowledge in history that begins with a radical admission: we don't know. It assumes that the old texts are not the final authority, and that our current understanding of the world is incomplete and likely flawed. This simple admission that we are ignorant was earth-shattering. It shifted the entire goal of knowledge from preserving old truths to actively seeking out new ones. From textual justification to empirical observation. It was a license to question everything.
Admitting ignorance was the first step, but science on its own is not enough. It is an expensive and often slow process. To fund this massive new project of exploration and discovery, science needed a partner, a new myth powerful enough to channel resources toward the unknown. It found that partner in capitalism. Before the modern era, economies were stagnant. The assumption was that the global pie of wealth was fixed. One person's gain was another's loss. But capitalism was built on a revolutionary new fiction, the idea of progress or credit. This is the belief that the future will be bigger and better than the present, and that by investing resources now, we will create more wealth tomorrow. This fiction of future growth created a powerful feedback loop. A capitalist, believing in progress, invests money, credit, into a scientific experiment. The experiment leads to a new discovery, like the steam engine. That discovery creates a new technology, which builds a factory, generating immense new profits. Those profits validate the capitalist's initial belief and provide even more capital to invest in more science. Science, capitalism, and empire became the inseparable trio of the modern age. European empires, unlike their Roman or Chinese predecessors, were not just conquerors. They were explorers. They funded scientific expeditions like James Cook's that were simultaneously missions of conquest. all financed by a new capitalist credit system that believed in the fiction of growth.
And so, our journey is complete. We have followed Homo sapiens from an insignificant ape in Africa, hiding from hyenas, to the undisputed masters of the planet. We did it not because we were stronger, but because we were the only species to undergo a cognitive revolution, gaining the superpower to create and believe in shared fictions. This allowed us to cooperate in the millions. The agricultural revolution was a Faustian bargain, a fraud that made our individual lives harder but allowed our population to explode, fueling the rise of cities and empires. And finally, the scientific revolution, built on the discovery of ignorance, fused with capitalism to grant us truly godlike power. In the 21st century, we are on the verge of turning our ancient fictions into objective reality. For millennia, we invented gods who could create life, vanquish disease, and live forever. Now, we are doing it ourselves. Through genetic engineering and synthetic biology, we are learning to create life. Through nanotechnology and medicine, we are close to ending plagues and even cheating death itself, Harari's Gilgamesh project. And through artificial intelligence, we are designing new forms of non-organic consciousness. We, the insignificant ape, have become the gods we once worshipped. But Sapiens leaves us with one final haunting question. For thousands of years, we've asked, what do we want to become? Now, with the power to re-engineer our very minds and desires, we must face a far more difficult question. What do we want to want?
Harari argues that the agricultural revolution was a trap, yet it laid the foundation for the modern world. I'd invite you to share your perspective in the comments. Do you believe trading the freedom of the forager for the collective power of civilization was a worthy exchange? If you found value in this narrative, please consider subscribing to support the work we do at Stratum Logic. To continue exploring the hidden structures of our history, click the video on your screen now. Thank you for deep thinking with us.